Today we're going to talk about plunge lines and when they're done wrong, why it creates a problem during sharpening, and how you can fix it. One of the biggest notorious brands that's guilty of this is Cold Steel. Now, I love their blades, really like their blades, but their plunge lines on many of their knives are just a pain in the butt to deal with. Here is an American Lawman. I've already fixed that. We'll look at that in more detail, as well as the Recon 1, and I've already fixed that one. I've got some other examples here on the table to show you some good examples, and yeah, we'll just jump right into it. Let's start right here. So the plunge line is this part right here. Let me do this. So there's going to be this section right here. So this is the plunge line. The thing with the plunge lines, and you can see it very readily in this one, is see this line right here? Kind of the different shades there as the light hits it, versus this line right here. It scoops down. It scoops down to start to form that primary edge of the blade here. But what happens is, a lot of times this blade edge will continue all the way back here. And you can see that over time of me trying to sharpen that, you can see what I've done to the edge, actually trying to fix that. By the way, I have modded this. I've stripped the paint to give that nice stone wash blade a nice showing there. Also back here I did the clip as well. But what happens is you have a thickness along the edge of the blade. So this is the primary edge. Now as you get back here towards the plunge line, so if we're looking at the blade like this, as you get back towards the plunge line, what actually happens is it thickens up. So now you're trying to sharpen this thick portion of the blade that's actually part of the blade, as well as your real part of the blade, I guess we'll call it. So what it does is it actually prevents a certain portion of your blade from being sharpened because it's riding high on that thick portion. Hope that makes sense. But what you'll see over time is, for example, you might see a nice shaped polished edge right here, but you won't right here. That's because you're not getting the contact you need because of this area. So what I did on this one is just take a Dremel and open that up, get rid of that thick blade stock, and try to get it down to this thin area, so it's just a consistent thickness from the very beginning part of the blade to the very end part of the blade. So that was the first time I did it on this one, and then I fixed it on the Recon 1 here. You can see, I don't have another one for comparison, but you can see it looks bigger than normal in there, and that's because I opened it up. Again, see the plunge line on the very side? You see how it scoops down? Well, this edge went all the way back. So it was kind of a pain in the butt to sharpen, and that will create problems. That'll start to create a recurve portion of your blade. So I just put a little sharpening choil in there, and sharpening is much easier. Now, the downside to this, and what some guys don't like, is when they're cutting, then all of a sudden you kind of, whatever material you're cutting goes down into here and hangs up, and they don't like that. So take that into consideration, because that does bother some people. Spyderco is typically pretty good. Here's a paramilitary 2. You can see there is no sharpening choil there. There doesn't need to be, because it's just ground correctly. You can look at it in this way, and it might be a little bit hard to tell, but there's no thick portion of the blade. It's all consistent. Another example would be the Centofonte. So I did not put this little sharpening choil in there. This comes standard with the blade. But that's an example of, plunge line being done right with a little added choil in there. Another example would be the Endura 4, where it doesn't have the little choil. Doesn't need the choil because the way it's ground, it's ground properly. So really, it's just these knives, and I wish I could have had some before shots. Actually, no, I might have a picture. It's these type of knives where that plunge line starts up high, divots down in, and then goes to that secondary bevel that creates the problem. So I've got a really cheap kitchen knife that, and I don't want to, I keep wanting to buy expensive one, guys, but my wife keeps putting them in the dishwasher in the sink, and it just beats the hell out of the edge. And so I can't bring myself to buy a nice one because it's just not being taken care of. So I run with the cheap ones, but it drives me nuts sharpening it because it has this problem as well. So I'll take you out in the garage and we'll fix it. Here's a good example of a bad example. So you can see here's your plunge line right here, and this part just makes for a pain in the butt sharpening. So if we flip the blade over and you're looking straight down, you can see how it's a much thicker, and then it tapers down into the actual edge here, which would be okay. This part would be okay if there was some sort of choil in here, so that you could kind of gauge where you are sharpening. Otherwise, what happens is you start riding up on this thicker material, and then you're not actually sharpening this point. And if you start down here, sometimes you just miss some of the edge, and it drives me nuts. So what we're going to do is we're just going to stick this in a vise. You don't need a vise for this. I just find it easier. And then we're going to create our own choil in here using a Dremel. But what I'm going to attempt to do is create the choil about right here. And then we'll take a look at the blade thickness here, and then if we have to, we can extend it out. If you really want to as well, which I may do in the future, I'm just going to start small here in small steps, is if the choil is right here, depending on how big it is, doesn't really matter, I could potentially just remove all of that material. But for now, I'm just going to start small, make it right here. Okay, what I'm seeing, you can kind of see it in camera there. Follow that edge, it goes down, and there's a slight upkick right about here. So I'm going to pull that out just a little bit more. And again, what I like to do on these is just little by little first. All right, that looks a little bit better. Now there's still a little bit of a heel there. So what I can do is just with sharpening, I can actually take that down. But that should work right there. I'm going to leave that for now. Here's a better angle to show you what's going on. But you can see right at the end here how it just kind of kicks up and out. Sounds like my neighbors are doing their snow blowing. You can see I got rid of that heel right there. There's your choil. This process will now make this a much easier job to sharpen. Again, I may remove all of this in the future. I don't know. On these type of things, I like to start small because once you remove that material, you can't put it back. So baby steps, see how it works, and if I want to fix it down the road, I will. Hopefully this will help illustrate it better, but you can see there's the choil. And without that choil and that blade stock down here being thicker, I'm going to exaggerate this, but this is how you're sharpening your knife, is it puts it in an angle. It's not very effective, and it's just difficult. So with that choil in place, you can drop that down, get it parallel, and then you're working with the same thickness blade stock the whole way. So now I'm going to get a nice even sharpening across this whole blade instead of just a portion of that blade. So hopefully you guys found this helpful. Certainly I would start off with some of the cheaper knives so you can get this process down a little bit, figure out what you're doing before you move on to a nicer knife. And yes, that said, even these really, really expensive knives, some of them do not get the plunge line correct. Cheap ones, nope, sometimes, and expensive ones, nope, sometimes. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the vid. Thanks so much for watching. See ya.